So we're going to move straight into the second session for this breakout room. The second session will be looking at the approaches to developing energy market resilience. I'm sure this is a topic a lot of us are waiting for, and I can guarantee you that, of course, we have a very, very able panelist to take care of this topic, approaches to developing energy market resilience, and this will be for 1 hour. Please join me welcome our moderator in the person of Professor Peter Oluseyi, who is a professor of Electrical Electronics Department in UNILAG. Please join me welcome Professor Peter as he takes on the podium. You're welcome, sir. Please put your hands together. Energy in the room. Come on. Okay, wait, we didn't get breakfast. I'll get you breakfast. Why am I seeing people smiling? You're welcome, sir. It's a pleasure.
Good morning, everyone. I want to appreciate all of us who are here for this kind of a great event. We want to appreciate the Lagos State government and the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources for the opportunity to share some of our ideas. On this note, I want to first of all call to the podium Dr. Folayinka Dania, the Lagos State Chief Resilience Officer in the office of the last room. Please come over to join us here, ma'am. Also, I have with me, yes, God bless you. Please kindly put our hands together as she comes forward. I also have with us here this morning Mr. Maximus Ogwuoke, the country representative of C40 cities. Please kindly join us here. And last but not the least, here this morning with us is Mr. Okechukwu Okoro, the Deputy Manager and Head of Energy Practice, G. Elias and Company. Please come over. So that. Check for me. Yeah.
So they have my slide.
I want to believe there is a slide for the Chief Resilience Officer for Lagos State Resilience Office. She will be taking us through the topic that is titled Approaches to Developing Energy Market Resilience. So I invite you forward, Ms. Dania.
Their email is at lagosenergysummit@gmail.com. Folayinka Dania. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, honorable commissioners here seated, permanent secretaries. Allow me to stand on all the established protocols. Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Folayinka Dania. I'm the Chief Resilience Officer for Lagos, and today I'll be taking us through approaches to developing energy market resilience. I'm sure over the last 2 days, as we've heard a lot about the energy system, and we know that this system comprises of primary energy sources, storage of energy, infrastructure required to convert and transport energy, the consumers of energy, and the underlying pillars of economy, knowledge, governance, finance, and legislation, and the ecosystem that surrounds the energy cycle. And of course, I'm sure we've heard about the energy transition and how we are moving away from fossil fuels to low carbon fuels, how we're trying to ensure that we move from a linear economy to a circular one, and how we're moving from one-way hierarchical transmission to smart network solutions, how we're transitioning to low carbon development, mobility, and green industry, and the need to center fairness and equity around our energy system and ensure that we have a fair representation for the rights of the planet and future generations. But today, we're talking about the energy market. And I'm sure you've heard what this is. First time I heard energy market, I was thinking market again. But then it's not different from any other market. It's the market where the buying and selling of energy commodities is taking place, and it involves wholesale and retail, immediate and long-term, even capacity markets, where we're ensuring that there are mechanisms in place to ensure sufficient power generation capacity is available to meet future demand. And we know that this market comprises of both renewable and non-renewable energy. And the participants include the producers of energy, the independent system operators, the market regulators, the consumers, and the likes, to ensure that everyone that has a demand is met, and everyone that has something to supply is able to supply it, and that balance equilibrium actually happens. So even though we have many markets in Lagos, many energy markets in Lagos, this is the schematics of the electricity market in Nigeria, and we're hoping to domesticate that in Lagos. But if we look at these schematics, we'll see that it's heavily reliant on one source of fuel for energy production, and that is gas. As of 2022, we had all except 3 of the GENCOs being powered by gas. Only Shiroro, Kanji, and Jeba were powered by water. And the electricity system here, electric generation in Nigeria is mainly privatized. The transmission is owned by government. The distribution to consumers is privatized. And the consumers do not have much choice around what kind of energy they use in terms of the one directly provided to them, as in we're stuck with whichever discos as in we have been assigned to, and the only place where we have a choice is in the renewable energy market. So if we look at this energy market, we'll see that we have to build resilience because anything could go wrong. Imagine something happens to gas. Next thing we'll hear is blackouts. Am I correct or am I correct? Am I correct? Okay. Are we together in the room? Are we together in the room? I don't like talking to myself, or I'm a teacher. Are we together? Thank you very much. So it's important that we build energy market resilience. And this resilience always sounds like a big word. It's very, very simple. It just refers to the ability of this our energy system to withstand and recover from disruptions. And disruption just means anything that will not allow the consumer to get energy supply, which in most cases we refer to is referring to electricity in our own system. So what are the possible causes of disruptions to the energy market? Mainly electricity, as I said earlier. Damage to infrastructure. They could be from extreme weather events, floods, droughts, extreme temperatures. It might even be from traffic accidents. We've had instances where a car will just hit a pole, and that community, there's no lights for 1 week. Am I correct or am I correct? Am I correct? There's vandalism and theft. In 2022, I remember reading something around Eco Disco saying that they lost an estimated sum of about 4 billion naira only to vandalism. That's huge. aging infrastructure. A lot of the infrastructure that we have in place was put in place during the military rule. And that is why you hear things like there's problem with the transmission, and that's why we don't have electricity. Fuel supply shortages is also what could cause disruptions to the energy market currently. This is electricity that we are talking about in this instance, because as I said, we rely mainly on gas. Faulty equipment, you see transformers blown out in a community and they don't have light for 3 months. Rapid urbanization, you see there are communities that have developed quicker than were able to put the infrastructure in place. The cybersecurity threats also, we could exist now that we are moving from the hierarchical systems to the new network-enabled systems. Strikes from people, from the staff who have poor working environments. It could be political instability in the oil-producing regions, since we are mainly dependent on fossil fuels. It could be slow onset events, such as sea level rise, extreme heat, extreme rainfall. And there have even been studies that have shown that if we do nothing to even mitigate the effects of climate change, 12% of the power grid in Lagos will be lost to this. And then now imagine mixing all this together, 1, 2, 3 things together, and then we would have extended and unpredictable power outages. Even tariff increases could cause disruptions to the energy market, because we'll have reduced income for discos if people decide that they are not going to pay, or reduced access for communities that cannot even afford to pay the current rates. So it's important that we're able to build resilience. And I'll talk about the various sectors that we'll be talking about resilience in, but just to further explain what resilience is. For us to say a system is resilient, it needs to be a reflective system. That is a system that uses past experiences to inform future decisions. Because it doesn't make sense doing the things the same way and expecting a different result. If something doesn't work, it doesn't work. We need to look for what we can put in place to make sure it works. We need to be resourceful and understand that there are many ways to use these limited resources that we have. The systems need to be robust. That means they need to be well-conceived, well-constructed, and managed systems. We need to know how they can fail and put in plans to mitigate these failures when they happen. And the energy system, if we say it must be resilient, needs to be a redundant one. And this is where people ask, redundant, okay? But it simply means that we need to put in place spare capacity purposefully created to accommodate disruptions. The average consumer already has redundant infrastructure in place. Am I correct? Let me explain. How many of us have generators in our houses? I have a generator. Can you raise up your hand? Thank you very much. That is redundant infrastructure for when power fails. Am I correct? But now we're saying the system itself needs to have that kind of capacity. What are the plans for when disruptions occur? What's the plan when your particular GenCo cannot deliver electricity to you? What's the plan when transmission lines are not working? What's the plan when vandalism happens? What's the plan when your infrastructure fails? What is your promise to the energy consumer on how quickly you will be able to restore electricity in this instance to them? And even though I'm mentioning electricity, what I'm describing cuts across the various energy markets, whether it's gas, whether it's for transportation, whether it's in the built environment. But let's just focus on electricity because that's what we're familiar with. And then the energy system needs to be flexible, meaning that it must be willing to adopt alternate strategies in response to changing circumstances. And there needs to be integration across urban systems. So whether the energy system likes it or not, it is closely interconnected and interrelated with our various urban systems. So whether it's our healthcare system, our transportation system, our waste management system, and the likes, if we don't have plans in place to ensure that there's proper integration, even the economy as a whole, that one is one that is very, very key because we see businesses leaving Nigeria because of the poor power supply. So it's very important that the systems are actually integrated. And then putting in place all these qualities, we'll be able to say If they pass, if the system has a check mark against each of these qualities, then we can say the system is actually resilient. So what are key aspects of the energy market resilience that we need to look at? What are the key aspects of the market that need to be resilient? One is the supply chain. So from production to consumption, the procurement and supply chain needs to ensure that resources can be accessed and transmitted smoothly, even in face of disruptions. Another aspect is finance. As in, we need to ensure that maybe the energy companies in this instance have the capacity to manage the financial risk associated with market volatility. This could be flat price fluctuations or regulatory changes, like what has happened in Lagos. Now we're saying we're having our own electricity market. Imagine if the companies were not resilient enough to be able to put in place the ISOs that our laws actually say they need to put in place to separate the Lagos market from the general market. Then there's also consumer resilience. We need to ensure that the households and businesses should be able to adapt to the changes in energy prices or even energy costs or availability, potentially through efficiency measures or backup energy sources. We talked about the backup, the captive power that we have in Lagos State, the captive generator capacity in Lagos State, and I think someone mentioned earlier was over 15,000 megawatts. That is huge. And people are already, even though tariffs are going up, people are realizing that we need to put in place energy efficiency measures at home. We're turning off our lights. As in, we're turning off things that we're not using. We're buying energy efficient appliances in the houses to ensure that the electricity that we require, we're still able to use it, but within our own different processes. As in, that shows resilience. Then the energy system itself, whether it's the power grids, the infrastructure itself needs to be able to withstand and recover from disruptions, whether it be weather, whether it be cyber attacks, whether it be vandalism, whatever it is. How quickly can power be restored to the consumers? Because that is the measure. How often are we experiencing blackouts? And of course, it's just geopolitical landscape. Politics can change. Anything can change. And it's also possible that there could be conflicts in the regions where we are producing the oil that we require to power our generating companies at this time. And it's important that we have strategies in place to be able to mitigate this risk. But most importantly, there needs to be adaptation and learning, because resilience is not just about reacting to disruptions, but also learning from them and adapting to changing circumstances. So in short, what we're talking about is, if we're talking about energy resilience, then we're talking about holistic energy resilience, because there's no other way to get it done. And to do this, we need to be able to understand what are the risks and vulnerabilities of the physical energy infrastructure, what are the interconnections and interdependencies among the different urban systems, and how do these actions influence the production, distribution, and consumption of energies in cities. Because if we do not understand the risks, then we don't know what it is that we are planning for. We need to be able to examine the institutional arrangements, alignments, and collaborations in order to understand and respond effectively to critical energy challenges. Market operators should be able to manage their financial parts of the market. The ISO should be able to maintain the technical aspects of the grid and ensure provision of power. The regulators must be able to enforce and promote competition and also protect the customers. If we don't know who is responsible and are they properly aligned, how do we respond to critical challenges? And last but not the least, we need to be able to assess the social, economic, and environmental aspects of advancements and transitions within the energy system. Understand what the potential costs and benefits are for urban development and quality of life. In simple terms, holistic energy resilience is based on 4 principles: equity, risk awareness, enabled systems, and ecology-driven actions. And to do this, there's something we call the City Energy Resilience Framework, which is a tool that actually guides cities in applying a resilience lens to their energy system and ensuring that the right quality of electricity is provided at the right quantity, to the right place, at the right time, at the right price. And there are 4 dimensions to this framework. Let's look at it in detail. So the first part is the people, the end users, the stakeholders. The first lever here is ensuring that we have empowered customers. These are empowered consumers who can make effective decisions on their energy use. Who says that we have to use the discos? The renewable energy is available, it might be cheaper, it might have higher initial cost, but the only way we can make these decisions is if we are aware of what it is that is available. Then also needs to put in place effective communication channels. How do we communicate with the energy providers? How are we able to make informed decision-making, even in the implementation of some of the initiatives that need to be implemented? How many of you knew that you had to be able to, that you were invited to consult on the energy law and you could have made an impact on what changes could have been made? Can I see your hands? You are consumers. When the law was going to be put in place, you could have participated in the process. You are a major stakeholder. There needs to be engaged stakeholders, as in we need to ensure that there's coordination and collaboration among stakeholders in the energy system, including the different levels of government, for decision-making, for resource mobilization, and for innovation, because the market is not static. There also needs to be put in place sustained human capacity to ensure that we have the capacity required for effective management and operations of the energy infrastructure put in place, or else there will continue to be incessant strikes and shutting off of this grid. The next dimension is resources. And this looks at the infrastructure and natural resources. The first lever looks at responsible natural resource use. Everybody is now thinking about how do we move to renewable energy. And of course, even though there's a drive to move from fossil fuels, it doesn't mean it's going to stop in 2 years' time, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, or even in 20 years' time. So there must be concerted efforts to drive energy transitions and foster low carbon economies, especially within planetary boundaries, because our children, our children's children, our children's 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 children are still coming to live in this world, and we must be able to protect them, especially from the impacts of climate change. There needs to be risk-informed infrastructure management, and this ensures that we're able to effectively manage our infrastructure in a timely, collaborative, and efficient manner, knowing fully well what could go wrong and putting plans in place to ensure that we're able to respond and recover quickly from these disruptions when they arise. And this risk-informed infrastructure management also includes investments in infrastructure. There needs to be effective supply chain management. And this includes diversification of the procurement sources to minimize disruptions and make sure that we're able to reduce the impacts of shocks and stresses on the urban energy system and its independencies. This would also include information sharing and cooperation amongst the various stakeholders. The third lever is governance, and this looks at our leadership and strategy, because there's no point, even if we have all these other levers in place, without appropriate leadership and strategy, we'll just be wasting our time. So it's important that there are transparent and enabling regulatory processes put in place to safeguard the public interest, and also enforcement of these regulatory processes. Because there's no point having laws and they will not be enforced. In fact, we're all looking forward to a competitive market, and we hope that that is what we'll eventually get in Lagos going forward. There needs to be coordinated and committed leadership to ensure the voices of all the stakeholders are heard. We know that in Lagos we have the political will. We know that the governance is also in place, but we need to make sure that we're able to address the concerns of everyone in the market. There needs to be integrated system planning, meaning that the integrated and adaptive systems need to be put in place based on new technologies, evolving best practices, and emerging shocks and stresses across independent urban systems, whether it's health, transportation, waste management, and the likes. What are the needs? What are the new needs that are required? And what are the emerging things that could disrupt these processes? Do we have those plans and strategies in place? And how do we ensure that we minimize disruptions? And last but not the least, we have the systems. We look at the operations and management itself. The first lever looks at ensuring that we have inclusive service provision that ensures universal access, meaning that we should no longer have situations where we have areas that are underserved or no longer served because we brought the market local. Sustainable finance is also important. We need to have in place sustainable financial frameworks and investment approaches that consider changing economic conditions. In the last panel, I heard someone talking about investment, how long it will take for it to come out. The truth of the matter is that we need to have plans for that, and this needs to be based on available data so that people can make real-time, effective, and informed decisions, and ensure that also technologies and risks are also considered. And last but not the least, we must have adaptive system operations, which are informed by the latest climate and disaster risk data to ensure that we're able to adapt, to adapt and ensure that we're able to achieve our long-term resilience goals and our urban resilience goals. So it looks like a big system, but it's important that we actually apply this lens to our system to ensure that it is resilient. Because if we don't know what these risks are, then we will be wasting our time. How do you invest in a business or in a system where you don't know what the risks are? So I cannot live without talking about some of the possible measures that could come out of these assessments. We could end up being diversification of energy sources. It could be investing in and promoting energy efficiency. It could be around developing backup systems, power systems, or energy storage technologies. It could be around strengthening our energy infrastructure. It could be around improving regulatory frameworks that exist. It could be around developing contingency plans, what is the backup plan of the backup plan of the backup plan? What is plan A, B, C? And it could be around building the human capacity that we need to drive the sector. But the actual measures and the extent of their implementation will depend on actually implementing the assessment and the outcomes of the assessment. And by doing this, we'll be ensuring that we're able to expand access to clean and reliable energy. We'll be able to advance digitalization efforts, thereby enabling efficiency and interconnectivity. We'll be able to increase overall urban resilience against chronic stresses and shocks, as in beyond the energy market. And we'll be able to advance the broader just transition to low carbon development. And we'll be able to improve the entire economy by unlocking co-benefits of energy projects, which could be green jobs and enhanced public services, amongst others. Thank you very much.
Can we please put our hands together for her once more? Please just permit me to allow her to come to her seat first. Yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Maybe I should just do a little review of what she has done this morning. She started by giving us the fundamentals of how electricity is generated, and then she went from that level to the aspect of energy resilience discourse. And from there, she was able to give us that for energy resilience, there are certain things that you need to have: diversification, decentralization, digitalization, and things of that nature. And then from that point, we moved on to look at the major pillars of energy resilient framework. She was able to discuss about the people, governance, system, and she was able to give us information about the economic aspect of it. And then in rounding up, she was able to give us the benefits of energy resilience. And that brings me to a point whereby I will want the Barrister Okoro to come in, and I would like to ask him at this point, what practical policies should the government prioritize to encourage resilience across sectors? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And thank you, Doctor, for that interesting presentation. You know, when we talk about, the question is around policies, initiatives, or focus towards energy resilience. A point which I want to make before that is that for any organization that actually wants to grow, one of the things such organization has to put in place is some kind of risk mechanics. We hear of offices having risk officers whose duty is to sit down every day and think of all the possible things that can go wrong. And it's actually good to know that in our state, we'll have the Lagos State Resilience Office that sits to think of what is it that can go wrong so that we don't wait till the risk crystallizes before taking steps. And the same applies to the energy sector. And the question is, what are these policies? And I would say the first of it is to have an emergency response plan. An emergency response plan. You know, having in place what are the things that can go wrong if we do not have gas, if the power supply in the state or the grid goes down and all the rest of them. I mean, having policies that address this, sitting down and thinking of all the possible things that can go wrong in the energy supply system within the state. Very critical. The second that also looks like that is around policies that allows for, you know, diversification of the energy mix. Looking at what we have currently in the country, most of our energy source is still still fossil, enabled fuel or fossil source of energy. I think we need to have in place, and good enough, with the amendment of the Constitution, which now allows for states to make their own electricity laws. And it's interesting to know that our state, Lagos State, has also last year passed the Lagos State electricity law, and we are currently in the process of transition, which is transitioning from the carve out of the Lagos State from the national regulator, you know, that is what is currently ongoing. Now, what part of what will help for energy resilience is having policies in place within the state that will allow for energy mix. So we'll have different sources of power, both the renewable, the gas, the LNG, and our traditional fossil, because this is part of the way. Rather than all, you know, just relying only on the grid, we could have other sources of energy supply for the state. That would also be a way to handle in a case of an emergency. Another thing that can also be done is also incentives, policies that provides incentives towards these alternative energy sources, so that we don't have all our eggs in one basket. You know, having policies that provide some kind of incentives. Already we'll have some of these at the federal level, but these are things that states, now that we now have states making laws and states now regulating power generation and power distribution within their confines, there should be policies in place that provides incentives in form of getting, expedited process of getting approvals and permits from the regulators, the electricity regulators. We could also have these incentives by way of taxes as well. This will go a long way to encourage investment in these alternative sources.
Thank you, Barrister.
Thank you, sir.
You will continue, you got to incentive, and I need to stop you at this stage. You will continue later. Excuse me. I want Mr. Ogwuoke to give us an intervention. And that intervention has to be with the vulnerables in the society and who are at the bottom of the ladder. When you are talking of this incentive and the rest of them, how do we bring them into the global map of this energy resilience exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, the moderator. Hi everyone. Let me start by thanking the Lagos State government for thinking about addressing the energy needs of the informal settlers in this forum. It's not always all the time that when a convening like this is held that they think about the informal settlements. But before I take my intervention, which is going to be based on a research which we carried out in Lagos State informal settlements, their energy needs, I want to ask how many of us that have been to Makoko, please raise up your hand. Raise it well. Okay. If you have not been to Makoko, chances are that you will not understand very well the enormity of the challenges the informal settlers are facing in Lagos, especially when it comes to energy need. So, the report I'm going to look at, it is online, and I encourage people also to go and look at it. It is titled Energy Needs in Informal Settlements in Lagos. You can search for it and get it. So the research happened in 181 informal settlements in Lagos. I'm sure the number will be a bit surprising that we have up to 181 informal settlements in Lagos. And this just covered 16 local governments. We didn't go to all the 20 local governments, and of course, the LCDAs. We just covered 20 local governments. And we looked at how they use energy in cooking, in cooling, and in lighting. So let me take cooking, for example. In all the informal settlements we surveyed in Lagos, over 52% of the residents, close to 53, use LPG. So they use gas to cook. While the remaining use either charcoal, firewood, or kerosene. Then in terms of being satisfied, those of them who are using LPG said they are very satisfied in terms of even the costing and how efficient it is. But those who are using charcoal, firewood, and kerosene expressed a lot of dissatisfaction. In fact, they made it clear to us that the reason why they are still using those primordial mode of cooking is simply because they can't afford LPG. Now, one point is very, very clear here. We have that number of people using LPG because of Lagos government program in that regard. So it is important that that program on LPG in Lagos should be intensified to get to other people, the remaining 40-something% that has not just embraced LPG. Now, in terms of lighting, and that is very, very interesting, an average person that lives in informal settlements is connected to the grid. 82% are connected to the national grid. But in terms of access to energy access, the data we receive indicated that on the average of they have energy for the average of 6 hours. And it's erratic. It could come anytime. Of course, all of us live in Lagos, and unless we are living in a Ban A zone, of course, you understand that power supply is a bit erratic. So the power supply in informal settlements in Lagos, very, very erratic. So this is how they get by. And I want Lagos State government to pay attention to it. There's what they call phone charging kiosks. Phone charging kiosks is just a contraption that has up to 50 and more sockets where we can charge either your phone or your torch lights, or just basically that. So what they do essentially is that one big man will set it up in a locality, and then people will come in there to charge their appliances for 100 naira per charge. So it creates a lot of business opportunity for those people who are doing it. And then if you look at it critically, you look at how much somebody spends, 100 naira per day for 1 month, just charging your phone, you know it is a lot. But the opportunity I see there is that government should be able to, instead of using generator to power those charging kiosks, they can use solar. Because the energy demand is not much. So that's about energy. Another great opportunity, based on the survey we carried out, is that 95% of those surveyed indicated interest in solar panel. Now, the challenge now is that, like all of us know, solar panels does not come easy for you to have access to solar. And government is encouraged to develop some business and funding models that will be able to enable people that live in informal settlement have access to, solar panels and then pay in installments. Let me just punctuate here for now.
Can you please put your hands together for him for that wonderful research that he said they carried out. Now, still talking about the issue that you have raised about accessibility, affordability of energy to these people, an equitable supply of energy to them, which is one of the SDGs that is being looked into. I will want Mr. Okoro to assist us with an intervention by taking a look at what regulatory reforms are most urgent to enable a resilient, competitive, and efficient energy market in Lagos State.
Okay, thank you. I would point 3 things in terms of what we need to do as a matter of urgency. I had mentioned before that with the Lagos State electricity law, which was passed last year, the expectation is that at some stage this year, the regulation of power within Lagos State will now be purely within the confines of Lagos and will no longer have to deal with NEC, except to the extent that the power being generated goes across or outside of Lagos State. Now, the first of it is that there's need for clarity. There's need for clarity. Investors, if we talk about diversifying as a way to ensure energy resilience, it means we're actually asking for different energy mix, and which requires investment. And investors coming in need clarity. They need to know, what exactly do I need to do? What kind of approvals do I need to get? What licenses? Who am I going to be dealing with? Part of the challenge we'll have in the power sector, and which is not peculiar to the power sector, it cuts across different regions, is that you are dealing with a number of regulators. Some you do not know. But once there's clarity as to what needs to be done, and also ease of getting these approvals, that will be a way of addressing that challenge. That's the first. Now, the second of it is, and which was also mentioned during the keynote speech, is around improving on what we already have on ground. A lot of the infrastructure we currently have in place have been on ground. The transformers and even the wire, the poles and all the rest. Once in a while we hear about grid collapse and all the rest. There's need for upgrade. It's also an area that government needs. These are things that needs to be done as a matter of urgency. There's need to modernize the infrastructure. And then the third, which is closely related to this, is that there's also need for funding. Now, this funding can be a miss. Some of what we've seen in some other jurisdictions is where government set aside funds. There are funds that are specially set aside to encourage investments or to also take care of cases of emergency. We have what is called contingent fund. We can also have this for the electric power sector. Where funds are set aside, we have what is called, some countries, we hear of green banks, which are set up, and these are part of energy, resilience. Rather than, relying on the grid, we have this energy bank or these green banks. We've seen something like that. I think recently, somewhere like New Jersey in the US, they set up an energy bank. The state government set aside this fund so that people who are investing in this sector can actually get these grants or these incentives from there. And also funds from there can also be used in the case of emergency. So in summary, I would say 3 key things: clarity of policy, Second is investment in infrastructure, trying to upgrade what we currently have in place so that we reduce cases of energy losses and the rest of them. And then the third is availability of funds. This can come both from private and also from government. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, can we put our hands together for him for a wonderful intervention? I will come to Mr. Ogwuoke once more. I still want to throw that question to you that I asked him to help us vent his voice into. And how do I mean? I want you to give us what we can do so that the vulnerable and the informal settlements will be within the energy resilience plan of Lagos State, so that they don't just be one of the person. You don't just look at the rich and the middle class people, but these people as well, they matter a lot. We cannot dispense with them.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I think the very first thing Lagos State government should do is to recognize the fact that these people living in informal settlements are part of us. That is number one. Then number two is that, speaking specifically for energy resilience, government should develop some business and financial models. By this I mean there can be a tripartite agreement between government, an investor, and the funding organization to let people that live in the informal settlement have access to solar panels, for example, and pay over a period of time. I don't think there's anybody here who has the privilege of using solar, having solar at home, that is not singing hallelujah. I use it. I'm privileged to use it. And I was able to acquire it because it does not come cheap, because I had a form of subsidy. My organization, when I was working with C40, they subsidized it to the tune of, I think, $700. And that was why I was able to get it. And since I've been using it for the past 18 months, I have not touched my generator. As a matter of fact, I tell people, if you see anybody who wants to buy a generator, just send the person to me. So that is how good solar panel, how important they are. And another interesting thing there is that those people that live in informal settlements, their energy need is very, very small. Very, very small. They don't need energy to cool for air conditioning. As a matter of fact, in all the informal settlements I visited in Lagos, I couldn't count up to 10 air conditioners. And those air conditioners are not even working. So specifically, I think what government should do is to see how they can have financial or business models that will kind of give a form of subsidy to informal settlers to have access to solar panels. And also to escalate what they've been doing before, so that those who have not gotten LPG should be able to have it.
Thank you. Please, let's put our hands together for him once more. With regard to subsidy, he's spoken about subsidy. Can I make this clear to the audience that what I know very well is that the weakest link in any chain determines the strength of the chain. So when we are talking about energy resilience, we are talking about why we are so much interested about the people who are in the lowest rung of the ladder is because the stronger they are, the stronger we are. The stronger they are, the stronger we are together. Their strength determines the absolute strength that we have together. We'll be ready to honor one or two questions from the audience, but before then, I will want to put a question to Barrister Okoro with regard to the Lagos electricity law. If you have anything to say with regard to the energy resilience, what is yours?
Okay, I think whatever I need, the point which I've made earlier, which is on the point of clarity of policy is very important. At the end of the transition period, the expectation is that the Lagos State Electricity Regulatory Board, as the case may be, will come up with policies and regulations in terms of licensing and all the rest of them. And there's need for clarity. And maybe one more thing which I may say, maybe kind of as a general point in terms of energy resilience, is that looking at the reality of our country and even our continent, the level where we are in terms of electricity, we are still, I think the right way to put it is looking at the gap, the energy gap and the energy poverty which we have. I think that a way to move forward, this is my view, is that we need a collegial approach. And this is something that I know Lagos State has actually done well in, but we also need to do better and consolidate. And what is it? We need to come together. I mean, there needs to be a collegial approach. And by collegial approach, I mean some kind of engagement that brings together all the stakeholders in the sector. The generators, whether the DISCOs or the IPPs rather, and even the successor generation companies, the DISCOs, the IEDN, the bankers, the technical guys, everybody sits down in a room. Let's actually identify what our problem is, because it's a system. When you say grid is actually a system. And being a system, if there's a problem in one part of the system, it affects the other. So everybody sits down. What do we actually need to do? We need to get generation right. We need to get distribution right. We need to get metering right. We also need funding at the back of it. And at the end of the day, we also need enabling environment from the government. We actually need everybody in a room sitting down. Let's be able to isolate each of this problem and think together as a team. How are we able to solve this problem? How do we move ourselves from the level of energy poverty to level of energy being sustainable to the energy of even area of talking about even transitioning and the rest of them. But a way to go is everybody sits down. Let's identify this problem across the value chain and then as a team work together rather than dealing with it in an isolated way. So that would be my recommendation, that a way, while we talk about resilience, but how do we even get it right? First is to everybody comes together. Let's identify what this problem is and see how we can work together, the bankers, the technical people, the government, the independent generators, the independent distributors, the DISCOs, the successor GENCOs, the EPC guys, the O&M. What do we do to get it right in Lagos? And I think that way we're able to solve our problem as a team rather than addressing it in an isolated manner. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Okolo, for that intervention. We appreciate it. Maybe let me just put it this way from what he has brought forth. We want to appreciate Lagos State Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources because this is a good setup to start off from what you have just rightly said now, that everybody needs to come to the same table and discuss together. And we can see the previous panel or panelists that came forth with some of the sources and how to source for fund and the rest of them. They have done that, and bringing our own team on board in order to identify areas that may be a kind of weak links in the process of moving the Lagos energy ecosystem forward is a very commendable one. And that brings me to let us know at this stage, as we are waiting for anyone who has questions, that number one, energy determines the cost of anything and everything we are using. The bottle of water, the cost of a bottle of water is determined by how much of energy you have expended in producing it. The cost of the food in the grocery stores is determined by how much was used to produce it from the perspective of energy. The goods that are brought in from the other states and even within the state, you have to use energy to bring them to the market. So energy is very, very crucial to the whole ecosystem. And on the account of this, there is hardly anything anyone can do without giving energy a priority of place, which is why we want to appreciate the Lagos State government and the Lagos State Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources for this. And from what the panelists have brought forth, they have been able to tell us that, yes, energy resilience is very, very crucial. There must be diversification, there must be decentralization, there must be digitalization. We can't run away from this. And likewise, we have been given some of the components of energy resilience pillars, which we must really taking care of in order to build a strong energy system in Lagos State. On this note, I don't know, before I ask my panelists to give their final remark, do we have any question in the house for the panelists? If there is any question, you can just raise your hand wherever you are. Any question there? Please let somebody help us with the microphone for. There's no question. Okay. Please, can somebody help us give the microphone to?
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Olabode Sowunmi. I'm a lawyer with Dentist Zekas Law. So briefly, we just wanted to ask a quick question with regards to resilience. From a state law perspective, what implementations or mechanisms does the Lagos State government have intend to implement with regards to grid collapses and this newly constituted electricity market? So what will we find differently in the Lagos State government? So that's briefly a question that we had. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If I may respond to that question, even though I do not work with the Lagos State Electricity Board, but the point I'll make there is that, remember, what has changed, the major thing that has changed is the regulation. The generation and the distribution of electricity has been privatized. The only thing that the law does is that regulation is now done at the state level, which is why I said that if we still want to get things right, everybody needs to sit together. The government making the regulation, the investors in the generation, the investors in distribution, the TCN is also planned to be privatized, right? Everybody sits down in the same room so that we'll see, okay, why government comes up with policy? What do we need to do technically to ensure that things like this do not happen? And if I may rehash, what the law basically does and addresses the fact that regulation and implementation is done by the government, but investment is still something to be done by the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Barrister Okoro. And to add to what he has said, that is what resilience is all about. And that's why I kept on saying decentralization, digitalization, and the rest of the Ds. But more importantly, when you want to talk about grid collapse, that means we are talking of the electricity coming from elsewhere to Lagos. So Lagos needs to build a resilient system by making sure that it's not only depending on the national grid, but rather there are IPPs with regard to what the barrister has rightly told us. With the available law now, there could be a pocket of other sources of energy to be able to, one way or the other, create what we call a slack energy. The energy that will be there, that when you need it, you can always call upon it. And one of them is this solar. Another one is waste to energy, which the panels before us mentioned. And I may have to tell you that like my 12 market, I know of this during Fasola's tenure as governor, that there was a biogas, a biogenerator in my 12 market in those days, which is used, but later, I don't know what became of it. Those kind of things are the decentralized form of energy. And likewise, the way the Lagos State supplies the street lights in Lagos is part of the decentralized kind of energy. So there won't be total dependence on the grid all the time. So that's the essence of the decentralization that we are talking about here. Thank you for that question. Any other question? Okay, if there is no other question, can I ask Mr. Ogwuoke to give us his final statement?
Yeah, thank you very much. First is to also to commend Lagos State government one more time for being proactive in having the energy law. I think Lagos is the first, if not the only state that has done that. And then to plead with players, stakeholders, to make sure that they have a copy of that law, look at it very critically, and also ensure that the informalities are not left behind. And I want to encourage relevant MDAs to also take the message of what is contained in that law to the informalities. Because these people are actually one of us, and it's important their needs is also taken care of. By the way they define people that live in slum is somebody, if you're living in a place where you cannot press a button after using the toilet and the flush is just consider yourself as living in a slum. If you still use, fetch water to flush your toilet, just consider yourself as living in a slum. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Okay, Barrister.
Thank you. Final words for me. 3 things in summary will be, first, when we talk about resilience, a key way to go is that there needs to be an emergency response plan. There should be a plan in place. Think of all the things that can possibly go wrong in the energy space within the state. There should be a plan on what can be done, what should be done at such time. Not until those things happen. That's the first. The second would be enabling environment. By enabling environment, I mean there should be policies and clarity of these policies to take care of, investments in the energy sector within the state. People need clarity. People want to know exactly what are the regulations, who am I going to be dealing with, what approvals do I need? I don't want surprises. I don't want to invest thinking I'm dealing with ABC and tomorrow D is knocking on my door saying you didn't get XYZ approval. People want clarity on, regulations, dealing with, now that it's now within the state's confines, people want clarity, and it's something very critical. And then the last but not the least, which I talked about, is a collegial approach, which is everybody needs, every stakeholder needs, we need to come together. Let's look at the problem, and let's see how we can work together. It's a grid, and when we talk about grid, it's a system, meaning if A is working and B is not working, we still haven't solved the problem. So we all need to sit down, from the regulator to the private investor, to the bankers who are providing the funds. We sit down. How do we solve this problem? There are lots of opportunities within our state. Within Lagos State. How do we solve the energy problem so that we'll have enough power to be able to serve, and we'll have all what it takes to be able to serve Lagos and also serve neighboring and even export power outside of Lagos. And that would be it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Dania, I don't know whether you have any statement for us.
Thank you very much. I just want to add that resilience is incremental. We won't have all the solutions at once, but it's important for us to be able to assess the risks, prioritize them, and begin to look for solutions in a prioritized manner. Because if we take on all the problems at once, it's very, very unlikely that we'll be able to address all of them. So, gentleman asked a question around, what do we do if there's no grid? The truth of the matter is that you must have, just as Barrister said, you must have backup plan. So for everywhere you have the grid, there must be an off-grid solution to ensure that there is a plan that is in place to ensure that another system kicks in when one fails. Very, very important. However, we cannot do all that in one day. But the appropriate thing is, do we have our hands on the wheel? Yes. Are we ready to start? Yes. Rome was not built in a day. We'll eventually get to the electricity market of our dreams. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate all of you. Thank you for putting our hearts together. And if we agree at this point that energy resilience is both a technical and a social project, what one bold policy shift would you each recommend to Lagos State? That question is for you, so that when we meet again, maybe in 12 months' time, you'll be able to give me an answer to that question. On this note, we want to appreciate everyone who has been part of this team. Please kindly put your hands together for our panelists.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you can do better than that. Please put your hands together for our distinguished panelists and, of course, Mr. Moderator, the Prof himself, who has done a fantastic job here today. We will close this session by presenting their plaques to them. And to help us do this, you know they've done a great job, so they are worthy of their honor. To help us do this is the Honorable Commissioner, Energy and Mineral Resources, Gombe State. Please join me welcome Honorable Sanusi Ahmad Bindiga to the stage. You're welcome, sir.
I have here Maximus, Ogwuoke, in recognition of your participation as panelist at the Lagos Energy Summit 2025. Signed, Biodun Ogunleye.
Please put your hands together. Please step forward for pictures. Sir, please step forward for pictures.
Thank you. I have again here this morning or afternoon, Dr. Dania, in recognition of your participation as panelist at the Lagos Energy Summit 2025. Signed, Honorable Commissioner Biodun Ogunleye.
Please put your hands together, the only woman standing on this panel and doing other women proud.
I have again here this afternoon, Barrister Okechukwu Okoro, in recognition of your participation as panelist at the Lagos Energy Summit 2025. Signed, Honorable Commissioner of Energy and Mineral Resources, Biodun Ogunleye.
Thank you so much for your contribution and input here today. Lastly, but not the least, of course, this one is going to the Prof himself for such a great job moderating this session. All right, we'll take a group picture, but please may I request the presence of the Honorable Commissioner for the group picture, sir? Please may you join us on stage. Please step forward for the picture. I think it would be great if we have the lady in the middle. Thank you.